The WNBA finally got the star they prayed for, but now they're trying to silence her. From intentional media erasure to whispered threats of suspension, a quiet war is being waged against Caitlin Clark. As Stephen A. Smith exposes a system that prefers control over greatness, the world is asking, is the league protecting its future, or is it trying to destroy the very player who saved it? For championships, that's not luck. That's not accident. That's basketball mastery at the highest level. So, when someone with that resume talks about the Indiana Fever, when they drop names, share insights, and break down a team that's been the setter of every headline in women's basketball, and somehow they forget to mention Caitlin Clark, the rookie leading the league in assists, the player who single-handedly forced networks to broadcast WNBA games in prime time, the woman who made casual fans care about women's basketball for the first time in decades. You expect us to believe that was an accident? Stephen A. Smith didn't buy it. And neither should you. Because what happened next didn't just expose a slip-up. It exposed the system, pattern, a quiet war being waged against the most electrifying player in WNBA history. And at the center of it all, the commissioner's office. Now, before you click away, understand something. This isn't about one moment. This isn't about one interview or one bad take. This is about what happens when the people running the league fear the very star who's saving it. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the WNBA. She detonated it. Ratings exploded. Arena sold out. Jersey sales went through the roof. NFL players were getting custom Caitlin Clark cleats. NBA stars were rocking her shoes courtside. This wasn't just hype. This was a cultural earthquake. And somehow the league's response wasn't celebration. It was control. Think about that for a second. The WNBA had spent years fighting for visibility, begging networks for coverage, watching viewership stagnate while players spoke openly about the struggle just to be seen. Then Caitlin Clark walks in and suddenly the world can't look away. You'd think the league would roll out the red carpet. You'd think they'd protect her like the golden ticket she is. You'd think they'd be screaming her name from rooftops. Instead, warnings behind closed doors, off the record, whispered conversations about behavior, about image, about representing the league the right way. Caitlin Clark, who has been nothing but class, who handles pressure like a 10-year veteran, who never throws teammates under the bus, never disrespect opponents, never gives the media anything to twist. That Caitlin Clark was being quietly disciplined. And for what? For being too successful. For making the league's legacy players uncomfortable. For doing what the league itself couldn't do for 2 decades. Stephen A. Smith saw happening. He saw the subtle benching. He saw the lack of public support. He noticed when the commissioner's office went silent while Clark took hard foul after hard foul with no protection. And when the moment came, he didn't stay quiet. He exploded. But here's the thing. Stephen A. didn't just go after one person. He didn't just vent frustration. He laid bare the entire system that's been working against Caitlin Clark since day one. And what he revealed is bigger than basketball. It's about power, about jealousy, about what happens when an institution can't handle its own success story. Stay with me because what Stephen A. said next didn't just shake the WNBA. It changed the conversation forever. Let me paint you a picture. It's a packed arena. Thousands of fans, most of them there for one reason, Caitlin Clark. The energy is electric. Cameras everywhere. This is the moment the WNBA dreamed about for 20 years. And then the game starts. Caitlin checks in. The crowd erupts. She moves without the ball, creates space, demands attention from every defender on the floor. She's the engine, the heartbeat, the reason people are watching. And then she's on the bench, not injured, not in foul trouble, just sitting. The camera pans to her face. Confusion, frustration, discipline. Fans at home are refreshing Twitter. Why is Clark sitting? What happened? Did I miss something? You didn't miss anything. That's the point. There was no explanation, no injury report, no logical basketball reason to bench your best player in a moment when the whole world is watching. Unless the benching wasn't about basketball at all. Stephen A. Smith caught it immediately and he didn't mince words. How do you talk about the Indiana Fever and mention a multitude of players and not one of them is Caitlin Clark, the rookie leading the league in assists? How do you do that? He wasn't just asking, he was indicting. Because here's what most people don't understand about Stephen A. Smith. The man isn't just a hot-take machine. He's been in the sports media trenches for decades. He knows when something's political. He knows when narratives are being shaped behind the scenes. And he knew exactly what was happening to Caitlin Clark. The league wasn't supporting her. They were containing her. Every time she showed emotion on the court, scrutinized every time she played with fire and passion, quietly noted. Every time she dared to be bigger than the game itself, warned. Meanwhile, opposing players were throwing elbows, landing cheap shots, testing her with physical play that would have had referees blowing whistles if it happened to anyone else. And the league's response, silence, no statements, no protection, no acknowledgement that their biggest star was being hunted every single night. But the moment Caitlin reacted, the moment she showed any frustration, suddenly everyone had something to say. Stephen A. called to what was a double standard wrapped in institutional fear. Wisely quick to warn but slow to defend. That question echoed across every sports podcast, every talk show, every comment section in America. And nobody from the commissioner's office had an answer. You know what they had instead? More silence. The same silence they offered when Caitlin needed backup. The same silence that told fans everything they needed to know about where the league priorities really were. But Stephen A. wasn't done. Not even close. Because he understood something the commissioner clearly didn't. You can't build a league by tearing down the player who's building it for you. You can't preach growth while punishing the person responsible for that growth. And you absolutely cannot expect loyalty from a star you refuse to protect. The commissioner was playing a dangerous game. And Stephen A. was about to show her exactly how dangerous. What he said next didn't just challenge the WNBA's leadership. It exposed a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone imagined. Here's what the WNBA Commissioner didn't count on. Stephen A. Smith doesn't forget. When he locks onto something, when he sees injustice, hypocrisy, or institutional cowardice, he doesn't let go. He digs deeper. He asks harder questions, and he doesn't care whose office he's pointing at. So, when the whispers started circulating about what was really happening behind closed doors, Stephen A. grabbed a microphone and burned the whole thing down. The commissioner looks more comfortable controlling Caitlin Clark than protecting her. Read that again. Controlling, not coaching, not guiding, not mentoring. Controlling, that's not leadership. That's insecurity dressed in a suit. And Stephen A. wasn't the only one who noticed. Fans had been watching for months, connecting dots, seeing patterns that the league thought nobody would catch. The hard fouls that went uncalled, the flagrant contact that referees mysteriously missed, the post-game silence from league officials when Caitlin was targeted. And then, like clockwork, the sudden concern whenever Caitlin showed even a hint of frustration. One set of rules for everyone else. Another set for the woman carrying the league on her back. Stephen A. laid it bare. You don't threaten the star who's carrying the league. Simple, direct, undeniable. But here's where it gets darker. Because the control wasn't just happening on the court. It was happening in meetings, in private conversations, in carefully worded suggestions about how Caitlin should present herself. Reports started leaking. Nothing confirmed on paper. These things never are, but loud enough that insiders couldn't ignore them. Caitlin Clark had been warned about her image, about her behavior, about how she was representing the league. Let that sink in. The player who brought more eyes to women's basketball than anyone in history. The player who turned casual viewers into diehard fans. The player who made the WNBA relevant in households that had never watched a single game. That player was being told to tone it down, to fit in, to be smaller. Stephen A. Smith was furious. And honestly, he had every right to be, because he'd been in this industry long enough to recognize what was really happening. This wasn't about basketball decisions. This wasn't about team chemistry or playing time management. This was about power. The commissioner's office was watching Caitlin Clark become bigger than the league itself. And instead of celebrating that, instead of riding the wave, they panicked. They tried to shrink her. Stephen A. put it perfectly. You can't grow a lead by shrinking its biggest voice. Think about the arrogance it takes to look at someone like Caitlin Clark, someone who's done more for your league in one season than decades of marketing campaigns, and think, We need to control this. That's not vision. That's fear. And fear makes people do stupid things. The commissioner wasn't protecting the league. She was protecting her own authority, her own position, her own ego. And Caitlin Clark was paying the price. But here's what nobody expected. The pressure was building. The warnings were mounting. The silent treatment was taking its toll. And then the unthinkable happened. A word started spreading through locker rooms, front offices, and media circles. One word that sent shock waves through the entire basketball world. Quit. Quit. That single word hit the internet like a bomb. Social media exploded. Headlines ran wild. Every sports outlet in America scrambled to confirm what seemed impossible. Was Caitlin Clark actually walking away? The woman who dreamed of this moment her entire life? The player who broke records at Iowa, who filled stadiums, who made little girls across the country believe they could be basketball stars, too. Was she really done? Fans refused to believe it. This had to be a rumor. This had to be misunderstood. But Stephen A. Smith knew the truth was more complicated. And what he explained next broke hearts and open eyes. This wasn't Caitlin Clark quitting basketball. This is what happens when a player feels boxed in. Pause on that. Box in, not defeated, not exhausted, not falling out of love with the game. Boxed in. There's a difference between losing and being suffocated. There's a difference between struggling and being sabotaged from within. Stephen A. understood that Caitlin wasn't giving up on basketball. She was drowning in a system designed to limit her. Every creative impulse, questioned every emotional moment, criticized every flash of the brilliance that made her special. Treated like a threat. You can only tell a superstar to calm down so many times before they stop burning bright altogether. And that's exactly what the commissioner's office was risking. Stephen A. dropped a warning that should have sent chills down every WNBA executive's spine. Push too hard and stars don't fight back, they disengage. And once that happens, you've already lost. Read that again. Let it marinate. The greatest danger wasn't Caitlin Clark leaving in a dramatic press conference. It wasn't some explosive retirement announcement. The danger was quieter, deadlier. It was Caitlin Clark simply stopping. Stopping the extra effort, stopping the infectious energy, stopping the magic that made everyone tune in. You can't force greatness. You can only create the conditions for it to flourish, or you can crush it with rules, warnings, and fear. The commissioner chose a latter, and the cracks were already showing. Fans noticed. At first, the spark in Caitlin's eyes during games wasn't as bright. The joy she played with, that Iowa joy that I can't believe I get to do this. Energy was fading. She was still producing, still racking up assists, still filling arenas, but something was different. The weight was visible. The pressure was taking its toll. And instead of the league stepping in to lift that weight, they added more. More scrutiny, more whispers, more quiet suggestions that maybe Caitlin needed to adjust her approach. Stephen A. saw it happening in real time and he refused to stay silent. You don't warn the player who fills arenas. You don't threaten the star who was making you relevant. You protect them. Period. But protection was the last thing on the commissioner's mind because this was never about what was best for Caitlin Clark. This was about control, about hierarchy, about making sure everyone knew who was really in charge, even if it meant destroying the best thing that ever happened to women's basketball. And then the commissioner made her next move. It was a mistake Stephen A. predicted, and it changed everything. When you're losing control, you have two choices: adapt or double down. The WNBA commissioner chose to double down. And that's when Stephen A. Smith went from critical to absolutely nuclear. See, here's what smart leadership looks like. When the public starts questioning your decisions, you listen. You adjust. You show humility. You demonstrate that maybe, just maybe, you heard the concerns. But the commissioner's office, they did the opposite. Instead of easing the pressure on Caitlin Clark, they increased it. Instead of offering public support, they dug deeper into silence. Instead of protecting their biggest star, they reinforced the invisible walls around her. Stephen A. couldn't believe it. Instead of calming the situation, the league tightened its grip. And that was a mistake. The mistake, not a misstep, not a miscalculation, a fundamental leaguing, legacy-destroying mistake. Because here's what the commissioner failed to understand about Caitlin Clark. She wasn't just a player. She was a movement. To be quieter, to represent the league differently. The logic was insane. It was like owning a restaurant that's been failing for years. Finally hiring a chef that packs a house every night and then telling that chef to stop cooking so well because it's making the other cooks look bad. That's not leadership. That's self-sabotage. But Stephen A. saw something even deeper. Something that explained why the commissioner was making such irrational decisions. Fear, not fear of Caitlin Clark failing. Fear of her succeeding. Because if Caitlin Clark became too big and she transcended the league entirely, then the power dynamics would shift forever. Right now, the commissioner controlled the league. She made the rules. She set the tone. She decided who got elevated and who got ignored. But Caitlin Clark was threatening that structure just by existing. Her popularity wasn't coming from the league. It was coming from her game, from her personality, from the authentic connection she'd built with millions of fans who didn't care about WNBA politics. That terrified the people in charge. Stephen A. recognized a pattern. He'd seen it before in other sports, other industries, other power structures. When someone becomes bigger than the institution has two choices. Embrace them or destroy them. The WNBA was choosing destruction. Not openly, not honestly, but through 1,000 small cuts, warnings, benching, silence, isolation, death by 1,000 policies. And Caitlin Clark was bleeding. But here is what the commissioner didn't anticipate. The fans saw everything and they were about to make their voices heard in a way the league couldn't ignore. The backlash came like a tidal wave. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended for days. Fan accounts that had never engaged with WNBA content before were suddenly posting detailed threads exposing every instance of unfair treatment Caitlin Clark had received. And they had receipts, video clips of hard fouls that went uncalled, screenshots of broadcasts that mysteriously forgot to mention her name, timestamps of games where she was benched for no logical reason. The internet had become a courtroom, and the commissioner was on trial. Stephen A. Smith watched the movement grow something between satisfaction and vindication. This is what happens when you underestimate fans. You think they're not paying attention. You think they'll accept whatever narrative you feed them. But they're smarter than that. They see everything. And they did. Fans started tracking patterns that even sports analysts had missed. They noticed which referees consistently let opponents foul Caitlin without consequence. They documented which commentators avoided saying her name. They cataloged every moment of disrespect, big and small. The evidence was overwhelming. But what surprised everyone, including Stephen A., was who joined a movement. It wasn't just WNBA fans. It wasn't just women's basketball supporters. NFL players were speaking out. NBA stars were posting support. Athletes from completely different sports were watching what was happening to Caitlin Clark and saying, "This is wrong." Stephon Diggs got custom Caitlin Clark cleats made. New Orleans Pelicans players were wearing her shoes courtside. This wasn't just a WNBA story anymore. This was a sports story, a cultural story. And the commissioner's office had no idea how to respond. Their playbook was built for a world where nobody cared about women's basketball, where controversy stayed contained, where power stayed concentrated at the top. But Caitlin Clark had rewritten all the rules. Stephen A. pointed out the obvious. You created the situation. You had a golden opportunity to ride the wave, to celebrate the success, to be part of the story. Instead, you tried to control it. And now the story is about you. The commissioner had become the villain. Not Caitlin Clark's opponents, not rival teams, not tough competition, the league's own leadership. Fans weren't just supporting Caitlin anymore. They were actively working against the commissioner, calling for resignations, demanding accountability, organizing boycotts of games where they felt Caitlin was being mistreated. This was unprecedented. In the history of women's professional sports, there had never been a fan uprising like this. There had never been this level of engagement, this intensity of emotion, this willingness to fight for a player. And it was all happening because the commissioner made one critical error. She forgot who really runs sports, not executives, not commissioners, not boardrooms. Fans. Fans buy tickets. Fans watch broadcasts. Fans purchase merchandise. Fans create the engagement that attracts sponsors. Without fans, there is no league. And the fans had chosen Caitlin Clark. Stephen A. Smith smiled when he saw the tide turning. The commissioner thought she was the most powerful person in the WNBA. She just found out she was wrong. But even as the pressure mounted, the commissioner refused to change course. And that's when things took an unexpected turn. Something strange happened. In the middle of all the chaos, all the controversy, all the pressure, Caitlin Clark did something nobody expected. She went quiet. Not angry quiet. Not defeated quiet. Peaceful quiet. Reporters waited for explosive statements. Fans expected frustration. The media was ready to capture whatever emotion response came next. But Caitlin Clark just played basketball. She showed up to practice. She worked with teammates. She handled interviews with grace. She refused to pour gasoline on a fire that was already burning bright enough. And somehow that made the commissioner look even worse. Stephen A. Smith noticed immediately. Look at her. Look at how she's handling this. She's been nothing but class. Nothing but professionalism. Nothing but exactly what you want your biggest star to be. And this is the player you're trying to control. The contrast was devastating. On one side, you had Caitlin Clark, calm, focused, continuing to dominate on the court despite everything happening around her. On the other side, you had a commissioner's office scrambling to justify decisions that made less sense by the day. Fans saw it. Media saw it. The entire sports world saw it. Caitlin Clark wasn't the problem. She never had been. The league's own insecurity was the problem. Reports started emerging from Indiana's locker room. Anonymous sources, teammates willing to speak off the record, and what they described painted a picture that contradicted everything the commissioner's office had implied. Caitlin Clark was beloved, not tolerated, not accepted. Beloved teammates talked about her work ethic, her unselfishness, her willingness to make everyone around her better. They described someone who showed up early, stayed late, and never acted like she was bigger than the team. The attitude problem the league had hinted at, it didn't exist. The behavioral concerns that warranted warnings, fabricated narratives. Stephen A. Smith addressed a head-on. They tried to paint her as difficult. They tried to suggest she needed to be managed. And the people who actually know her, the ones in that locker room every day, are saying the complete opposite. The commissioner's credibility was crumbling. But here's what made everyone stop and reconsider the entire situation. Caitlin Clark herself spoke about the front office. Not with bitterness, not with resentment. She acknowledged that despite everything, despite the controversies, the pressures, the external chaos, she was okay with the people around her. She was okay. Stephen A. reflected on that with something close to admiration. She seems okay with it. She seems okay with everything. And if she's not tripping, I guess we just have to let it play out. Let it play out. Those words carried weight because they suggested something the commissioner hadn't considered. Caitlin Clark wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't going to quit. She wasn't going to let the pressure break her. She was going to outlast them. The question wasn't whether Caitlin Clark could survive the WNBA. The question was whether the WNBA's leadership could survive Caitlin Clark. And based on everything that had happened, the answer was becoming clearer by the day. Stephen A. Smith prepared to deliver his final message. And it would be the most powerful thing he'd said yet. This is the part they don't want you to hear. The conclusion the commissioner hoped would never be spoken out loud. The truth that Stephen A. Smith made undeniable. Caitlin Clark isn't the problem. She never was. The fear of losing control. That's the problem. Stephen A. laid it out one final time with the weight of everything he'd witnessed behind every word. If the WNBA commissioner keeps treating stars like liabilities instead of leaders, the league will pay the price. Not in headlines, in silence. Silence. The worst punishment a sports league can receive. Not controversy, not criticism, not bad press. Silence, empty arenas, unwatched broadcasts, forgotten seasons, the slow, quiet death of relevance. That's what the WNBA was before Caitlin Clark. And that's exactly where a return of leadership doesn't wake up. Stephen A. Smith didn't just criticize a commissioner. He gave her a roadmap to redemption, one she still refuses to follow. Protect your stars. Celebrate your success stories. Stop policing passion and start channeling it. Simple concepts, basic leadership principles, things any competent executive should understand instinctively. And yet here we are, a commissioner more concerned with authority than achievement. A front office more focused on control than cultivation. A league that finally got everything it ever wanted and is actively trying to destroy it. The irony is almost poetic. For 20 years, the WNBA begged America to care. They pleaded for coverage. They fought for respect. They watched their players earn a fraction of what male athletes made while working twice as hard. Then Caitlin Clark arrived and suddenly America cared. Coverage exploded. Respect, genuine, widespread respect started building. The dream came true and the league's response was to punish the dreamer. Stephen A. Smith saw the tragedy of it. He articulated what millions of fans felt but couldn't quite express. You had everything. Everything. A generational talent, a cultural phenomenon, a player who did what your entire marketing department couldn't do in 2 decades. And instead of riding that wave, you try to drown it. The commissioner will never admit she was wrong. People in power rarely do. But history will remember this moment. It will remember a league that almost sabotaged its own renaissance. It will remember a player who stayed graceful under impossible pressure. And it will remember the voice Stephen A. Smith who refused to let the truth stay buried. Caitlin Clark will be fine. She'll keep breaking records. She'll keep filling arenas. She'll keep inspiring little girls who dream of playing basketball. The league will survive. Probably Caitlin's star power might be enough to overcome even the worst leadership, but something will be lost. Trust fans will remember how the league treated its brightest star. They'll remember the warnings, the silence, the subtle punishments for success, and they'll never fully trust the commissioner's office again. Stephen A. Smith made one thing absolutely clear. The story isn't over. The battle between institutional fear and individual greatness continues. The tension between control and creativity remains. But one outcome is already decided. Caitlin Clark won. Not because she fought back loudly, not because she threw punches or made enemies. She won because she kept being herself. She won because she refused to shrink. She won because no amount of pressure could extinguish the fire that makes her special. And Stephen A. Smith, the man who saw everything clearly from the start, made sure the world understood the truth. The WNBA didn't make Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is making the WNBA. And anyone who tries to control that, they'll be remembered as the people who almost ruined everything. So here's my question for you. Do you stand with Caitlin Clark, or do you think the commissioner was right to keep her in check? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I want to see where you stand on this. And if you think Stephen A. Smith absolutely demolished the WNBA's leadership in this confrontation, smash that like button. Show me you're paying attention. Here's the thing. This story is still developing. The WNBA's next move could change everything. The commissioner's response or continued silence will tell us exactly who's really running this league, and I'm going to be covering every single moment of it. So, if you want to stay ahead of the narrative, if you want the truth before the media spins it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because when the next chapter of the story breaks, you're going to want to hear here first. The battle between greatness and control isn't over, and neither are we.